Chapter 37. The Birth of Greater New York. Andrew H. Green of Brooklyn was a most remarkable man. During the 19th century, his inexhaustible public spirit was poured into the founding of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the New York Public Library, the American Museum of Natural History, and the New York Zoological Society, and the establishment of Central Park. It was, however, in 1868, soon after the Civil War, that he had conceived his most magnificent idea, that of creating a greater city of New York. And from this idea, as well as the 30 years of labor he devoted to making it a reality, he gained the title by which he is best known, the Father of Greater New York. The same year that saw New York's population leap to the 1.5 million mark, having doubled itself in the preceding quarter century, found the legislators ready to entertain Andrew Green's idea. In 1890, a commission was appointed to work upon the subject. It was during this period of the commission's deliberations that New York began to create its soaring skyline. 4 or 5 stories had satisfied most builders up to now. 10 stories constituted a tall building, and more than 10 was a skyscraper. A visitor coming to New York on one of the North River ferries in 1890 would have seen the square red tower of the Produce Exchange, the spires of Trinity and St. Paul's churches, the sharp-pointed Tribune Tower, the brilliant gold dome of the new Pulitzer World Building, and the towers of the Brooklyn Bridge rearing themselves above the general level of other buildings in the city. Now, several influences caused New York to reach for the clouds. One was the pressure of population on a long, narrow island where, in the downtown section, every available square foot of ground was already covered by the old-type buildings. Business filled these from basement to roof, and still the demand for more space grew. Commerce had made New York. Now it seemed to be strangling it. Concerns from all parts of the country felt it necessary to open offices in the city which dominated shipping and finance. Space they must have, whatever the cost. There was only one answer. Put offices on top of offices. Go higher. Fortunately, elevators were improving, and people were more willing than formerly to ride in them to upper floors. Fortunately also, steel construction was solving the problem of gaining sufficient strength without using precious ground space for massive walls. These 3 factors, commerce, elevators, and steel construction, now caused a strange new city to grow upon the ground that had been trod by bartering Indians and revolutionary patriots. Higher and higher rose the buildings, until, as the century closed, the 26 stories of the Park Row building seemed a limit to human achievement. In the meantime, residences were following one another farther north, and northward followed also the retail stores. Fashion, when well established in 5th and Madison Avenues, began to extend beyond 49th Street. 23rd Street succeeded 14th, as it in turn had displaced Grand Street as the leading shopping district. The big store at 6th Avenue and 18th Street seemed almost unbelievably vast, and Tiffany's began to think of migrating from Union Square. A cartoon of the period showed the average New Yorker with all his goods packed on a camel, starting out on a road marked farther north. Now came a generation of new hotels, forerunners of future hundreds. The Waldorf, later to build itself an Astoria alongside. The First Plaza, the Netherlands, and the Savoy became the grand hostelries. Society was supposed to consist of the 400, ruled by Mr. Astor and Ward McAllister, but the multitude outside of this exclusive group were busily engaged in creating the real city and doing its worthwhile work. This was the time of the cable cars, which swooped around Dead Man's Curve at Broadway and 14th Street, of the Gibson Girl, the Floridora Sextet, and also of the growing pressure of city transportation. The rapid transit problem, wrote Mayor Gilroy in his message of 1894, is no nearer solution than it was 2 years ago. 2 years earlier had been born the story of the uptown commuter, that famous Mr. Brown who came home from business one day and met his offspring at the dinner table. "This is your father," Mrs. Brown is reputed to have said. "I am very glad to meet you, sir," responded the son with formal dignity. "I have often heard my mother speak of you." To supply the need of faster travel in town, a Rapid Transit Commission was appointed in 1894, with Seth Low and Alexander Orr among its members, and the commission's engineer, William Barclay Parsons, was dispatched to Europe to spend a year in study of foreign transit conditions. The 90s had also their great social and political upheaval, not unlike that which had toppled Tweed. Dr. Parkhurst, a Presbyterian clergyman, made during this time an investigation of New York's underworld, and early in 1892 exposed an alliance between politics and organized vice. When all the evidence was brought to light before the Luxo Committee of the legislature, the public indignation awoke. A reform ticket, headed by William L. Strong, was swept into power on November 6, 1894. Mayor Strong was the last to preside over Old New York. The Greater New York Commission finally made its report, recommending that Brooklyn and the territories now contained in Queens and Richmond be combined with Manhattan and the Bronx into one great municipality. In spite of the vetoes of two mayors, the legislature passed the recommendation and appointed a committee to draw up a charter. Thus, 5 years before his long and useful life was ended by the bullet of a crazed assassin, the venerable Andrew Green saw his dream come true. In 1898, a new city of more than 3 million inhabitants took its place among the world's great commercial centers. New York welcomed the 20th century with a wider vision than ever.